is an old partner. We are working with IGADI for many years, and I think this is a very good opportunity to collaborate again, even if we are doing it virtually. But from Casa Asia, we are very eager and looking forward to increase our activities in Galicia. So for us, it's a great pleasure to be here today. The topic of this section, I'm going to be very brief because the main guests, the speakers are the important people here. But let me tell you that the topic of this session is very important, challenging, with great implication not only for China and the US and the European Union, but also the world. And I think Europe must play a bigger role in the international stage in this period of transformation, and especially in this context of US elections. So I'm sure we will talk about this. And also, I think it's very pertinent to talk about this 2030 agenda. It's a good starting point to discuss the new relationship between Europe and China. And I think it's a good place to find also a common ground, trying to find an alternative for global governance. So I'm sure we will have many good ideas regarding this important topic of the EU-China dialogue in the framework of the 2030 agenda. To talk about these topics, we have three panelists, three great experts from Spain, China, and Portugal. And they will talk for 10-15 minutes. And then we will have a later debate with their presentations, with the people, and also among them. I'm going to introduce them very quickly. I have a very extensive and long resumes and bios, and I'm sorry, I will make it very short because otherwise we can spend the whole hour and a half explaining the bios, because it's really rich. First, I will present Professor Zhang, Director of the Center of the Spanish Studies at the Spanish Institute at the Institute of European Studies, as the prestigious Chinese Academy of Social Science. In Casa Asia, we collaborate sometimes with this Chinese Academy of Social Science, and really is one of the top academics and think tanks in the world. She got a scholarship for a year at the University Autonomous of Barcelona. So I'm happy to see that you know also Barcelona, Professor Zhang. And she has been doing research for decades in European economic and innovative policy studies. She specialized in the Iberian Peninsula, so she knows very well the topic. Secondly, Professor Carla Costa. She's a chair professor at the Instituto Superior de Ciencias Sociales at the University of Lisbon. And she's also at the Instituto de Oriente. She has a PhD in economics. And she has many publications and awards. I received a 30-page resume, so it means that your work is very rich, and it really I'm sure you have many things to tell us. And finally, let me introduce Miguel Otero, who is an economist also by training, and he's a senior analyst in international political economy at Elcano Royal Institute, one of the leading think tanks in Europe, and also an institution that with Casa Asia has an important relationship. He's also a professor at Instituto de Empresa of International Relations in Madrid, and a research fellow at the ISCSP of Management, Grande École in France. So now I will give the floor to Professor Zhang. Then Professor Miguel Otero will continue, and at the end we will have Professor Carla Costa, and then we can start the debate among all three and the question from the public. So, Professor Zhang, the floor is yours, virtually and from China, but the floor is yours. You can start now whenever you feel ready with your PowerPoint. Thank you. I'm going to disconnect my camera, so you probably will go faster, the connection.
Thank you. Good morning, thank you, Chairman, Professor Bueno, and also very it's my great honor to attend a conference organized by the ISCSP. And yeah, it's true from the brief introduction for the three panelists. I'm very honored to be the same panel to discussion the issues on the 2030 UN 2030 agenda. Actually, for the I think maybe 20 years ago, I have a several chance to visit Casa and have a conference there. I visit Barcelona also, Madrid many times, now in Lisbon. So our three professors, we have I think the same interesting research projects. Now, today I'm going to talk about how does the EU-China can cooperation on the climate change for the realize the UN 2030 agenda. I will quickly go quickly. Okay. Sorry, it's let me see. As with all we know, the sustainable development goals are universal call to the action to end poverty, protect the earth, and improve the lives and the prospects for everyone in the world. Now the UN 2030, they are 17 goals. Today, the progress is being made in many places, but however, it's not from the speed and the scale required. It's not the we emerged. So in the 2020 now, more actions to be taken. And China and the EU has already taken some cooperation actions for realized UN 2030 agenda. For example, the climate change cooperation partnership is one of a cooperation field. So I will focus on how does China EU can cooperation for realize the sustainable development goals. We can see the 17 goals, but I take the 30 goals climate change action. I think the almost the 17 goals something related to the climate change. For example, no poverty, need good health and well-being. So how to take more actions on mitigating climate change. It's a hot issue now in facing the globally and also in the EU-China. So what's EU-China? Why EU-China has played a very important role in the global climate governance, because whether EU or China, they are also the founding members of IPCC. I will go very quickly. Even China, EU, we are in the different stages of economic development and different political system, but we are same willingness to mitigate the climate change and decrease the emission reduction emission. So make the climate temperature below the level of 1.5 the centigrade. So now China also very active. The active actors, they have more cooperations. Let me lift something. For example, EU already has very important law. We can see EU has taken concrete actions to, for example, they claim that it's a key advocate, also ruler maker in the policy area of mitigating global climate change. And let's take some example. For example, 2005, EU take care out EU emission trading system. This is the innovation system, market force. EU wants to use the market forces to regulate the carbon market and realized their energy and climate as a target. After that, we can see EU European Commission published several very important framework. For example, 2007, this is the first integrated energy climate change framework, and it realized to get the 3 2020 targets. And after that, there in 2014, another European Commission published 2030 climate energy framework. Now they have a European Green Deal. On the European Green Deal, the core element is European will become the first carbon nutrition continent in the 2050. So China also follow the EU to take apply their law on that. Now we can see some very important stages. For example, 2006, China proposed obligated targets to energy consumption per unit of GDP will be shrunk by 20% based on the 2005. Also in the 2007, China became the first developing country to formulate and implement national program to address climate change. And in 2009, China also set the goal to reduce the per unit GDP greenhouse gas emission in 2020 by 15% to 40% to 45, also based on 2005 year. Now China and EU has a cooperation on the climate change in EU. China we know in 1975, it's China EU has established the formal official diplomatic relations. But for a long time, at the beginning, EU-China has more cooperation on the economics, politics, people-to-people dialogue, like culture, even science technology cooperation. Until the 2005, it's about 20 years later, China and EU begin to have the cooperation and the partnership on the climate change. And so let's see, they have 3 stages. First, in the 2005, China and EU decided to have a formal partnership. This means that with the partnership, they have more cooperations and actions and projects. And after that, there are more communications and negotiations or dialogues by the ministerial dialogue legal mechanism. And Chinese Minister of Science Technology and also the European Commission in climate change, they are regular, has meetings and discussions, exchange views on the climate change issue. And after in 2015, we can see China EU and jointly published the statement of climate change. And why this is why the Chinese and EU, China and EU have a partnership of climate change a little bit later than the cooperation in the trade and field and the economic and other aspects, because in it's 2005, it's a very important year. That year, EU has a more innovation system, for example, ETS. Also, the Kyoto project, protocol, it's taking for. In fact, so many countries will have a willingness cooperations. It's not only realize Kyoto protocol, also the for the Paris Agreement in at that time. Now we can see the deepening partnership. We really try to achieve the 2 specific cooperation projects by this year, 2020. First, China-EU cooperation will have more cooperation on the zero emission coal technology. Chinese in Chinese energy consumption or China supply structure, we can see a lot of very high percentage of coal consumption, more than maybe 16% of energy consumption. So it's very important for China to have a cooperation with the European Commission, EU, how to use zero emission coal technology. It's first. The second is with sustainability. The final target is decreased the carbon emission. So that is already mentioned. The ministerial dialogue mechanism. That's a very efficient way to exchange views on the EU-China leaders, high-level leaders. And in 2015, China and EU jointly have a statement on climate change. Why at that time China EU has published the joint published statement on, because that is follow the Sino-US joint statement in 2014. For 2014, the EU wants how to say, China EU will have more cooperation on that field and play a leading role jointly. The second, it will be the joint statement on climate change has played a very important role to promoting the final conclusion of Paris Agreement. We know the national interests are using interest, not always the same, but both sides agree that ambitious and legally binding agreement needs to be reached in order to reach the Paris Agreement. And we can see after the partnership on climate change, China EU has many cooperation projects. Now it's you can see the very biggest cooperation from 2014. It's a 3 years project and help China with the 7 pilot cities to establish to establish Chinese carbon market. EU will provide support for the institutional design of China's national carbon market, including carbon emission cap, quota, market structure, and supervision, reporting, verification, etc. After the first cooperation project successfully finished, then in 2017, we can see another cooperation project they called EU-China Carbon Market Dialogue and a Cooperation Project. Now this year, this project now the project almost finished, and they have many policy dialogues in the different provinces in China. So almost they have a Chinese after this project. Chinese provinces in the regional level and the local level, municipal level, they have more knowledge about how to cut decrease the carbon emission. Now we can see this year is very special year. All people know there are 2 facts. One is the last year, by end of last year, European Union Commission published a new development strategy they called the European Green Deal. The other factor is the pandemic of COVID-19. It's very push the China and the EU, also the different countries can take the joint action to combating the COVID-19. So let me just briefly introduce what is this. Let's see. Because of pandemic globally spreading. So China and EU leaders have a basic and a common consensus should be more cooperation on the climate change, because this kind of a global disease should be maybe it's come from climate change, also come from natural. So that's why we should more action taking. And also they have a cooperation in their fields. The other reason is we want to change the traditional recurrent model. It's become a more green development. It's not the traditional model to recover the economy. So on September 14, 2020, the leaders of EU, China and Germany, the three parts have an in-depth exchange of views on China relations. On their discussion, we can find the climate change is become very more important elements in EU-China relations in the future. So in these dialogues, we can see China and EU will have more 4 major partnerships in the future. First, they were building a partnership fighting pandemic. The second is investment partnership to achieve the mutual benefits and win-win result. The third is creating a green and a digital partnership, expand new growth approach for EU-China cooperation. The fourth, it should be more copy on the multilateral partnership. It's now we can the PPT China. Our President Xi Jinping acclaimed that China will realize climate neutrality by 2016. It's very ambitious target for now, because we will realized this target. We should adjust our energy structure and speed up increase carbon emission. And there are many, I think many innovation technologies will be used, and some in policies will be adjustment, for example, in the transportation, in the energy, renewable energy, also in the buildings. Every sectors will be have reach this target, so they have to use the new technologies. So it's a European Green Deal. I think European panelists will know familiar. It's very much. So we'll just say, how does the core of the European Green Deal? It's a speed up the process of moderate global climate change and reach the target of make the European become a carbon neutral continent by the 2050. It's very ambitious target, even for the European EU member states. Also, the second is supply the clean, affordable, and secure energy, improving the energy efficiency. So energy is a key element for the reach the target, carbon nutrition target. The third is mobilize the industry for clean and secure economy to addressing the twin challenge, green and digital transformation. The fourth is engage in the innovation wave of all buildings and keep safe energy and in the resources efficient way. And that's another four aims is accelerating the shift to sustainable and smart transportation mobility, adopting the farm to fork strategy design, fair, healthy, and environmental friendly food system. This another list, preserving the restoring ecosystem and biodiversity. The 8 A's is a zero pollution ambition for the toxic-free environment action plan. That is, I think EU Green Deal have 3 geopolitical aims. First, is EU has always advocated the coordinated development model. It means that they were balanced the social, economic environment. We call the European model. It means that maintaining economic growth and social fair development, EU should not sacrifice the environment. The second is increasing the efforts to reduce the emission, helping you achieve the goal, maintain and enhance the leadership in the global climate change governance. The third one, it's I think after Brexit, European needed a common development strategy to unite the EU member states. They, in the Green Deal, they have take joint action to make the European more closed. That is geopolitical, I think. So in the new situation, in European Green Deal and also the COVID-19 the situation, it have more also the challenges and also some opportunities for China and EU cooperation on the climate change field. There, I think, looking forward the prospects of EU China, they have four several points should be pay more attention. The first, China EU has seriously impacted and affected by the new pandemic, but strengthening EU-China cooperation on the climate change is still and become hot or key element in the future now. And we will, I think there are more cooperation that even the China, after China declare, we also will become the carbon nutrition in 2016. They have a lot of discussion, cooperations will be happening in the future. The second is with the European Green Deal, they have a new European will have a climate change law. So I think we will we should take seriously and take a responsible action towards reach the carbon nutrition target. It's the second. The third is European Green Deal were promoting the transformation of EU climate governance from market rulers to legal basis. Why market rulers is ETS, use the market system to reduce the carbon emission, and a legal basis, it means that European will have a climate change law. Based on the law, all the EU member states should be leading by the target in the future. And the fourth, in the European Green Deal, they have a new mechanism. They call it the Just Transition Fund. This fund can be use the transition fund to balance the high carbon developed countries and low carbon developed countries to make them more development investment, or even for the China EU, we can have use a just transition fund to investment in China or investment in Europe. This is a good opportunities for China in the future. So now I think the time is very limited.
Yeah, sorry, Professor Zhang.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. You have a couple of minutes only. Thank you.
No, it's just 1 minute.
Okay.
I think the more cooperation needed if we will realize the UN 2030 agenda in process of joint tackling the new coronavirus. All countries have further realized that in solving global problems, especially the global climate change. We must unite and work together in the same boat. Therefore, strengthening a climate cooperation with China will promote developing the global climate governance mechanism was a more equitable and orderly direction. Joint action, more caution for it's needed. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bueno. I'm here. Thank you for participating, listening, involved.
Thank you for your contribution, Professor Zhang. Miguel, as you wish, whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Thanks, Rafa, and thanks, Igadi, really, for inviting me to this conference and this exchange with Professor Zhang and Professor Costa, with Ming and Carla. Well, EU-China relations, of course, in the context of the 2030 agenda, it's a huge topic, and obviously the relationship has intensified over the years. The EU and China, they trade roughly 1 billion a day. In many ways, they are, the two big investment and trade partners. They have as well as strategic cooperation and strategic partnership over the years. Ming, perhaps if you silence your mic, could you perhaps, yeah, that would be great, so that there's no interference. Thank you. But of course, over the past years, there have been a few tensions, and relationship has become a bit more difficult. And in Brussels, people say that the relationship with China is four-pronged, or has four phases. One is that China is a cooperation partner, and Professor Zhang's presentation focused on one of the fields where cooperation is closest and more intense, more important, which is climate change and tackling climate change. Perhaps all the multilateral agenda is in that realm as well. The view in Europe, of course, is that you cannot solve any big problem in the world without China, and therefore it needs to be a partner, and we need to cooperate with China. Then China is as well a negotiating counterpart, and we are negotiating now the comprehensive investment agreement with China. It's been going on for years, and it is ambitious, and people try to find a way to come to an agreement, but as I will develop a bit later, there are certain tensions with that. But constantly we are negotiating with China, and the European Union is negotiating with China. So a negotiating counterpart. Third, China is an economic competitor. In all areas, it has become in more areas over time as China has developed further, as China has become a middle income country with more added value in a lot of their products and brands. And now there's perhaps only one field where Europe really still dominates, which is airplanes, and that reduces the level of the trade deficit with China, because if it wouldn't be for airplanes and the exports of Airbuses to China, that trade deficit would be even bigger, which is already, and of course there's quite a lot of concern about China's competitive might. And whether that competition is fair or not, another big topic, as you all know. And fourth, China is now labeled a systemic rival, as you all know as well. and that has been nuanced by Josep Borrell, the Spanish High Representative for Foreign Affairs of the European Union, saying that it is not really kind of a geopolitical rivalry, a strategic geopolitical rivalry in that sense, but it's more like about systems. That the European Union has a system, a model, and China has its own system and its own societal model, and they clash because some of the principles, values, and ways of structuring those models are very different, and therefore there's a certain rivalry. There's a feeling as well that China is more assertive, more robust in defending its model, and its model it's becoming more attractive for other countries. So that's the comprehensive relationship, and that's why I think the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals, it's a nice framework to think about this relationship, because as you all know as well, the Sustainable Development Goals, and Professor Zhang has just presented them, the 17 goals, are very comprehensive, and we have moved from an agenda that was really focused on development and cooperation in that sense, and tackling hunger and tackling the whole development agenda, to broader themes, broader topics. So the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, they are really kind of going in a lot of areas of our society, of how we do business, how we develop economically, what businesses need to do, and I think that's the big achievement of this agenda. That now business and not only NGOs and people focused on development are really kind of focused on this agenda. And as I say, it's a very comprehensive agenda, because it goes from tackling poverty to strengthening multilateral institutions, to inequality within countries, to climate change, to a lot of work, to gender issues, and so therefore I think that's very valid to have a more complex and comprehensive analysis of EU-China relations. And as I was hinting at, those relations have become more symmetric in many ways. Previously, of course, China was a clearly developing country. The Europeans provided a lot of development aid and cooperation and know-how for a long time. But this, of course, now that China has developed, and in many parts of China, it is not developing anymore. It is a developed place, or you have to only go to Beijing or Shanghai and other cities in China to realize that. The relationship has become more symmetric, right? And that creates a new relationship, but it creates these tensions that I was talking about, which are, China's model has shown that it is resilient, that it is here to stay. The feeling that we had in the era of Clinton and the post fall of the Berlin Wall, the 1990s of Europe, where a lot of people thought that China would become more like the liberal democracies of the West. That realization is gone. That I think that there has been a wake up in Europe and in Washington about that China is not going to become a liberal democracy anytime soon, and therefore there are tensions in that regard, because the Chinese societal model is very different than the European one, right? And I am worried. I am worried about how things have been turning over the years in terms of a more authoritarian approach, not only in China, but in certain areas of the European Union, a more protectionist stand, not only from Washington with the arrival of Donald Trump, but as well in Europe, because of the aftermath of the global financial crisis, and of course now increasingly with COVID. and with high pressure from the United States in areas like the digital, telecommunications. The case of Huawei is here paramount. To side more with the American side on this, to try to limit the access and development of Huawei technology in Europe. And generally speaking, I think there is more of a almost Cold War or new Cold War, or certainly bloc mentality, and I see that in a lot of areas. I see that this by policymakers, I see it in the media, I see it by a lot of influencers and commentators. And for people that have worked on EU-China relations for a long time, this is certainly, I believe, worrying, because a lot of bridges are starting to get burned, and I think that's not positive. I feel as well that in Europe, there is quite a lot of patronizing attitude towards China. A great EU-China scholar like Kerry Brown has recently written about that the finger pointing in Europe, following a bit as well, the finger pointing in the United States on China, perhaps is not the best strategy in dealing with China. Now that Professor Zhang is here, this reminds me when I started my PhD, when I did part of my PhD at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and the Institute of World Economics and Politics, and I spent three months there. I was, my colleagues, my Chinese colleagues there, they were saying, Miguel, you were one of the few Westerners that came not here to lecture us. You actually came here to listen to us and to exchange with us and to see us as a bit as equals. And I think, that's a problem that we have generally, that a lot of people in the West, they strongly believe that the system is better, that the China system is wrong and should be changed. And I think that's not very the best framework to have, a relationship. Of course, China does a lot of things that are worrying and that we should condemn and that we should criticize, but that doesn't mean perhaps that we should not look as well at our own problems. Because my take here is that although we Europeans, we have been always very keen on present ourselves as Venus versus Mars, right? Mars was America. Those were the bad guys, the military people. The Iraq War was, again, perhaps the best example, while Europe was in multilateralism, in business, in trade, and with, the Americans were the policemen, and we Europeans, we were just like, great multilateralists and great, institutionalists and peacemakers. Well, I think over the past decade and decades, perhaps, I think we cannot say, the United States and China are now those that are breaking with the international liberal order, those that are more protectionist, more unilateralist or bilateralist, those that really kind of are now breaking with the system, when generally speaking, I would say that the European Union and a lot of the thinking in the European Union and in Europe over the years by its elites has been as well a key factor in producing the mess we have right now in the world. And let me here clarify a bit more. I mean, for a long time there was always this feeling that there was the Chicago school of that markets would self-equilibrate and that would kind of provide the best outcomes. Some would call it the neoliberal era, where really kind of the Washington consensus and the Chicago boys school would dominate, right? Well, there was the Chicago boys school, but there was as well the Brussels boys school, which was very much focusing on that through trade, through investment, through competition, through privatization, through more markets, we will have more efficient outcomes. And I think by now it is a strong consensus, even the IMF, most central banks, the European Commission itself, etc. I think there's a feeling that the markets, globalization, the European Union was a big cheerleader of the globalization we have produced over the past 20 years, and free trade created winners and losers. And it so happens that a lot of losers are in Europe, and have created a lot of discontent. And that's why we had Brexit. That's why we have Le Pen. That's why we have Salvini, and that's why we have the social tensions, the inequality, the disenfranchisement, the gap between the elites and the people that we have right now in Europe. And this is Agenda 2030. That inequality, institutions, same equality for everyone, that everyone has access. The divide between the urban cosmopolitan metropolis and the rural places in voting, in perceptions, in feeling of belonging are huge. And so my take on all of this is, if Europe really wants to be a multilateralist, that wants to really be a force for good in the world, to have a more strategic outlook, to have a more presence, more voice, more impact in world orders, especially in strategic questions, then strategic autonomy is all fine and good, but we need as well to look at what are the tensions we're experiencing within our societies, and not only divide between North and South in the Eurozone or in the European Union, or broadly speaking, or West and East, between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, but as well within our societies, the winners and losers, the inequalities that we are producing there. And until we don't really tackle those, until we don't really have a new social contract, and we restore kind of the glue of society and the social fabric that we have torn apart, it's very difficult for the European Union to have an impact and to relate to others. And China, it so happens that that is dealing with the crisis much better than us, the COVID crisis. We have major tensions in our societies. We are before a big challenge, and the Agenda 2030 is here key, because a lot of it's not only at the global level, but within our own societies that needs to be applied. And I think as long as the Europeans see that their model does not work, then they will be more interested in other models. And I think Eastern Europe is kind of a case study of this. I think it is not controversial to say that perhaps the shock therapy of the 1990s, early 2000s, perhaps produced, the kind of regimes we have right now in places like Poland and Hungary. And therefore, again, I think I would be a bit more humble as Europeans to think that our model right now is much better than the Chinese one, right? And so I think, we can certainly cooperate with China, and I guess, and I repeat, we should not be naive on many issues, and I fully support the strategic autonomy agenda in principle, and I think I finish broadly here. I think for Europe and Europe-China relations, at the end of the day, and we have done some work at the European Think Tank Network on China, where a lot of experts on China and different leading think tanks in Europe come together, and we discuss and we do research on EU-China affairs. Broadly, I think these are the four scenarios that are in front of us for the European Union. One is a clear siding with the United States, and the United States and it's a tougher approach on China. It's not only, as you all I think know it's not only a Trump thing. I think there's a big consensus in Washington across the aisle about a more robust and assertive and tougher approach on China, and with elements of isolating China, with elements of decoupling from China in a smart way, in many ways with stupid ways, but the idea is, look, we have to kind of be much more skeptical and critical and strategic in our relationship with China. And that's scenario one in terms of Europe's most important strategic economic partner remains the United States, and China. It's a market and has economic interactions, but the United States in the big questions about systems, about models, about liberal democracy, values, etc., will remain our key partner. And if push comes to shove, we should side with them. The second scenario, in many ways, is we jump on the Chinese dragon. The Chinese economy is now as big or even bigger now than the United States economy in 2005. It is likely to benefit even more after COVID from the turmoil in the West, and therefore will be a big attraction of dynamism, of growth, and Europe needs to be there. And like in the 19th century, when the United States was rising because of its scale and market, and the British realized that they could not really fight this rise, it had to jump on that wave. The Europeans should do the same. Here, perhaps the best example is Switzerland. Free trade agreement with China, trying to do as much business as possible with China, and essentially, Europe in the next 30 years cannot afford to not be in the Chinese market. And so, the relationship with China needs to be very important, and that might be tough with the relationship with the United States, but Europe needs to essentially kind of see more to the east, where the dynamism and the growth is, and the magnet of exports or imports from the Chinese side is, and then therefore that's the second scenario. The third one is Europe disintegrates further. The tensions are bigger. It becomes less important in world affairs. Some countries go with the United States, others will go more with China. There is no really cooperation, coordination. The Union, feels more tensions, and Europe becomes a hinterland, of the two big powers, China and the United States. That's scenario 3, which could be, it's like it's an option. And the fourth scenario is kind of, that Europe really pulls together, that, now with the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and with the issuance of more debt, and with the feeling that Europe needs to increase its sovereignty and its strategic autonomy. And I go back to what I said before, it stabilizes its internals, it has a new social contract, it has a new welfare system for the 21st century. It really, it improves the European model based on, political pluralism, rule of law, separation of powers, the welfare system, and a market economy, and a competitive market economy. So the European social market economy, and so it becomes, a player that, to finish up, goes from being Venus to going to being Janus, right? Janus, the god of transitions, the god that has two faces, the god that looks to the past what went wrong, but to the future, the God of doors and windows that still doesn't close down, that looks to the east and to the west, right? The two faces, looks to China, but looks as well to the United States, a place where still protectionism and authoritarianism and all of those threats that are on the horizon don't really close it down. And that perhaps is the big challenge for Europe and its relations with China, right? Whether its model can combine being strong at home, being autonomous, but as well engaging, cooperating with others. And I leave it here.
Thank you very much, Miguel. And now we pass the floor to Professor Carla Costa. Whenever you are ready with your presentation, Carla.
Rafa, thank you. Can I share screen? Am I allowed to do that?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Okay, is it working?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, so I have some difficulties listening to what you're saying. My sound is really bad. I don't know if you hear me in perfect conditions. So if you don't mind, do you think I could try to, I'm not very good in these technological issues, but to interrupt the video would be okay like this?
Yeah, we can watch it now.
Yes, you can see it. Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, so I hope you don't mind if I talk like this, but it really has some. I have some difficulties, and I think that maybe unplugging the video will help. Well, yeah. Okay. So I will start by saying good morning, everyone. I'd like to say I'm very pleased to be here representing the Eastern Studies Institute from the School of Social and Political Sciences of the University of Lisbon. I would like to thank Rafael, Daniel, and the Instituto Galego de Análise de Documentación Internacional, I hope my accent is not too bad, for the invitation to participate in this conference on the Jacobeo and the Silk. I will make some brief opening remarks on the relations between China and the European Union in the context of globalization or slowbalization, or the context of a fragmented global world. I'll basically will produce some reflections, though, so that we can then engage in some debate. I will try to develop a geopolitical and geoeconomic analysis because I believe that the merging of geopolitical and economic goals is becoming more and more frequently an important factor of state policies in the age of globalization or the deglobalization and the changing international order. So I've prepared a couple of slides. As I said, I've named this communication EU-China in a fragmented global order, some reflections. And I would like to start with a picture which I think is quite interesting, as a lot of authors have referred to the Tale of Two Summits, which was the most recent summit between the European Union and China in the 14th of September. And they say that they talk about a tale of two summits, because when you hear to the final the final declarations of the participants, China on one side and the EU on the other side, it's like they had been to different conferences because they were quite different. So I chose to place this picture here, which I think is quite a reproduction of some of the differences of interpretation of the results of this assignment. Well, in terms of framework, just a very brief framework in which I develop my analysis. I think we've been witnessing some very deep changes in the structure of global economic international relations from the second half of the 20th century to the first 2 decades of the 21st century. And these changes are really posing big challenges to the relations among big players, namely the European Union and China. I would just make a brief remark on the evolution of the international economic relations within this period. First, we have a period of globalization, which we can say in its early stages began in the end of the Second World War with the implementation of Bretton Woods regime with its features of embedded liberalism, and then developed into globalization and then hyper-globalization, in the words of Danny Roderick, which began roughly in the mid-80s. And then we have this evolution of globalization is stricken by a series of crises, namely financial crises that, from my point of view, are a direct consequence of the one of the fundamental pillars of globalization, which is the freedom of circulation. In this particular issue, I believe that free circulation of capital movements, financial movements, is really one of the most important determinants of financial and then economic crisis. And so we have here a second period that we could just name a few crises. For instance, in the second half of the 19th, the East Asian crisis, and then the big crisis in 2007, 2008, the sovereign debt crisis in Europe, and now the global crisis that followed the pandemic of coronavirus. And then we end up in the beginning of the second decade of the 21st century with a process that's or a stage that a lot of authors call the globalization, which in other aspects reproduces in the interruption or the shortening of global value chains, which were one of the main features of globalization. And with the pandemic situation, it hit the heart of the globalization, namely the free movement of people, of trade, of goods, and of capitals. So this is just a very brief framework to illustrate the context in which relations between the China and the European Union develop. I also would like to point out that this evolution points to a very important consequence, that is the relevance of domestic policies in tackling or not the most negative consequences of globalization. I will come to this issue later on because I believe also to be one of the main tension points in today's economic relations. As I said, I'm going to develop an analysis based on geoeconomics, what Edward Luttwak used to call the grammar of commerce and the logic of war. And according to Robert Blackwell and Jennifer Harris, is the use of economic instruments to promote and defend national interests and produce geopolitical goals, or the effects of other countries' economic actions on the geopolitical goals of a certain country. And that's the analysis I'll try to develop when equating the relations between European Union and China. So just let me present European Union. Well, just very simple indicators that we all are aware of. The European Union, with its 27 countries, it's the world's first trading power. It accounts about 30% of international trade in goods and services, and is the issuer of the second currency in the world monetary system, the euro. The EU is also the main receiver of intellectual property rights profits, is the main source and destiny of foreign direct investments, whether it concerns flows of stocks, and it's the biggest, if we consider all of its countries, the biggest world market economy in terms of gross domestic product. So what I mean is it should fulfill all the requisites to be one of the world's most relevant geoeconomic players. Well, is it? That's a question that I would like to discuss further on. How about China? Well, I will usually present China to my students with a sentence of it was became public when China started its development process and the integration into world economy. And it was highly restrained and I would say that in what concerns the model, the economic development model, China is still biding time, but especially since Xi Jinping, it's not hiding its strengths with a very strong conviction. So it has become wide open, exposed in world economics and politics. Well, a few indicators about China too is the second world economy. It's first in power, if we consider parity power purchase, but it's stricken by huge inequalities among its provinces, as it's already mentioned. It's the world's biggest energy consumer, but also strongly dependent on imports from other countries. It's the world's greatest commercial powers. Now for certain exports of goods and 11% of imports, second after the US. It's greatest become overcome by India in the near future. And I would definitely call it China as a geoeconomical player of paramount importance, maybe the biggest geoeconomic player of all in today's world. Just some curiosity in the relation between China and the United States of America, the world's first economic and political player. To say that well, if we look at some simple statistics, the world has really changed. For instance, in 1980, the part of China in the total. In 2018, the part of China in the international trade of goods is 13%. In 1978, Chinese GDP was circa 6% of US GDP. In 2018, China's GDP is over 60% of US GDP. China represents 48% of US trade deficits in 2018, and in 2017, China was the second country to register patents at World International Intellectual Property. According to some perspectives before the pandemic, but I think that the pandemic hasn't altered significantly these perspectives, China's GDP could actually overtake US by 2013. Still, China's GDP per capita remains slightly over 60% of US GDP per capita. One of the concepts I'm using to develop my analysis is of structural power of Susan Strange, because I think it's quite appropriate to explain economic and political relations. And as Strange says, the structural power is the power to shape and determine the structures of the global political economy within which other states, their political institutions, economic enterprises, and scientists and other professional people have to operate. The structural power means rather more than the power to set the agenda or to design international regimes of rules and that are supposed to govern international economic relations. That is one aspect of structural power, but not all. Structural power, in short, confers the power to decide how things shall be done, the power to shape frameworks within which states relate to each other, relate to corporate enterprises. And I think that China has fully understood this concept of structural power and enhances several set of actions in order to reinforce its structural power, because I think it has very strategy that it might have come a long way in what concerns namely with US and with the European Union, but it still has to fulfill some dimensions of this structural power in order to a global power. This structural power of Susan Strange is based on what's the structures. And the four structures that Strange identifies are security structures, and in what concerns more economic and financial issues, production and trade, credit and finance, and knowledge and technology. China is really developing some progress in what comes to production and trade. We've seen those indicators. Knowledge and technology also, it's growingly investing in research and development, and always it displays one of the main percentages of the weight of research and development in GDP in the world, and where it still has, from my point of view, a longer way to go is in what concerns credit and financial structures. And working on that, and is working on that through attempts to internationalize its currency, the renminbi, and attempts to build, and successfully it has built some financial institutions like the AEEB or the BRICS Development Bank, or the relations with Russia in what concerns energy trade, so these institutions could work as an alternative way to Western-led institutions such as Development Bank, for instance. I would call that China now has a number of assets and liabilities in world economy. In the positioning, the way it positions itself international economic and political system. Some authors say that China conducts a kind of a Bretton Woods a la carte. I did it my way. Now, I do believe that China and also India are among the countries that have best taken profit of the Bretton Woods systems in order to develop their strategies. However, China needs to keep changing model, and it has already acknowledged that. So it's tackling overcapacity and inequality of income distribution among its provinces. As I said before, the two dimensions of the strange structural power that China is working hardly is on the internationalization of the renminbi, what it takes to become a full economic powerhouse, and also on the upgrade of the technological base. China no longer wants to be the workshop of the world, and in order to do this, China has developed two major complementary, namely yesterday, so I won't spend a lot of time with them, but of course, we all have heard of them, the Belt and Road Initiative and the Made in China 2025. So from my point of view, these are the two instruments that China is developing in order to reinforce those dimensions of strange structural power. So I'll just skip a few slides so we can discuss them later on if you want to. I think I'm maybe going a little short on time. And then I would just try to focus on some reflections on the current economic and political situation and the relation between China and the European Union. Well, as we have heard, we are going through times of trade wars. And again, I would think that the trade wars are basically, the trade wars are the surface approach of a more deeper geoeconomic and geopolitical confrontation between US, China, and also the European Union. And this geoeconomic and geopolitical approach begins theoretically with a tariff escalation that do not comply with WTO rules, and China will be one of them. But then trade war develops and affects operation within global value chains, and this generates the globalization or the decoupling that Miguel was talking about with geopolitics. Refer to one of the most important ones from my point of view, which is the weakening of the multilateral system. I think that among the main these trade wars have been the multilateral organization, namely the WTO. Well, in what concerns EU-China relations, well, as we know, Miguel have already said that in 2018, the EU decided to change China's status from strategic partner to systemic rival, and this has to do EU being convinced that China does not comply with some important issues, namely investment issues, the famous comprehensive agreement on investment, which relate market access, climate issues, and also human rights. However, and I recall this, trade in EU and China is over $1 billion a day. So I think there's a very powerful economic instrument that it should not be passed into a second a secondary dimension of China's strategy in what relates to European Union is to divide her, which I think it's not that difficult in the case of the European Union. We see that there's a lot of interests among European countries in what relates relations with China, and we have, for instance, Germany, France, are the main recipients of Chinese investments, and so they have some difficulty in the engaging into harder attitudes toward China, with the exception of the UK, which recently has taken a hard stance and was followed by France. But for instance, as we've seen in the latest summit, Germany and France were both during the summit, they were complaining about the non-compliance by the part of China in issues related to market access or human rights, but at the same time they were developing huge business with the companies. So I think there's again a very cynical perspective maybe, but geoeconomic interests really have a very important say. Also, China influences other European countries, namely in Eastern and Central Europe, through the famous 17+1 initiative, which engages in financial assistance and the building of infrastructure to countries in financial distress. I should say that this is not only in Central and European countries. For instance, in the case of my country, Portugal, China has been one of the main investors in Portuguese economy for the last years, especially in sectors which might be of some concern in terms of strategic interest to economic and national security. Again, what about summit? As I said, there was a kind of a tale of two summits, since there were different opinions from each side on the outcomes of the summit. So while the EU expressed some doubt on the persistence of good relations with China because of the non-compliance by China of some of the important issues to the EU. We have witnessed the remarks from Chinese representatives that account for the importance of the cooperation that was achieved during the summit. It's a very interesting remark that I've done some reading and a brief content analysis of the speech at the end of the summit, and the word in the speech of Chinese representatives, the word cooperation appears cited over a dozen times. So it really it gives them on the way that each side saw the summit. I would like to point just an important point here, that although one of the that I think became evident in the end of the summit is that Europe tried to pass a message that is not, Europe is a player, is not a playing field. So it means that Europe needs to play its geopolitical and geoeconomic card. However, China is a huge power in international economic relations. There's no geoeconomic or geopolitical strategy that can exclude negotiating with China, and I believe that EU must be prepared to do just that. I will terminate with some perspectives on some of the factors, some issues that could conditionate the future relation between EU and China, and also, of course, the United States. The EU and the US have promoted China's entrance to the World Trade Organization, expecting that China would observe Western values. But as Miguel already said, reality did not match the narrative. I believe that China cannot comply with the demands without fundamentally changing its political economy system, and I don't think that will happen. On the contrary, maybe some countries, namely in Europe, will change their not their political systems, but the way they envisage the relationship between market forces and state policies. Quite interesting. For the last couple of years, some initiatives, namely from France and Germany, with the Franco-Germany manifesto, which is a clear stands for a strong industrial and competition policy that even predicts state aids to help European industry to overcome international concurrence. And this is quite interesting because they actually defending a more active way of state intervention within traditional market systems. On the other side, the US is aiming at decoupling its relation with China in order to delay China's growth. And I think this is particularly clear in what concerns technological issues. And here I would say that the European Union has a slightly different strategy. It does not decouple, it diversifies. The EU does not engage in trade wars, it corrects trade imbalances. And I think it's semantics, it has an important message. And it might be an important feature of EU way of dealing with China. On the other hand, China is enforcing its influence in the international system that, as I was saying before, it was created by the US and its allies. Just some example, the voting share in the international organization, the participating in the special drawing rights, the currency of the International Monetary Fund, the new financing institution that China is creating, the BRICS banks, the AEB, the global diplomatic network, which I believe it was in 2018, it overcame the US international diplomatic network around the world, the 17+1 compromise. These are all important factors to reframe this relationship. Some more ideas. The BRI and the MIC 2025 could have a significant part in deconstructing globalization, especially if coupled with the US and some of its allies' stance towards isolationism. Could have an important say on this matter. The US has not been able to cope with the most negative effects of globalization, namely the declining in manufacture, technological change, unemployment, inequalities, and these are reasons that have underscored the victory of Donald Trump in American elections. Here, there's an important issue too, because I think there's an important the outcome of the American conveys some strategic reflection on the EU action, because I think the relations between China and the EU could be quite different if Joe Biden wins the election or Donald Trump wins the election. Anyway, whoever wins, the trade war should persist, since in the context of the analysis that we've been developing, it's not merely a trade, but a geopolitical confrontation. And I would pose the question, does China plans to build a new world order? The US, again, according to Susan Strange, structural power. And I end my presentation with a couple of with a list of some opportunities and risks that might frame this relation between the EU and China. So China could turn towards the European Union as a trade and technological partner. EU could negotiate with China access to strategic and reserved sectors, such as finance. And it could also function as a middleman between Washington and Beijing, and thus reinforce its political influence, which it badly needs it. It also could exert some pressure on China towards economic reform, being the EU a very important market for Chinese companies and consumers. These are some of the opportunities, some of the risks. Of course, a global risk, the reduced global growth with impact on the more fragile EU economies and its cohesion, a growing tendency to protectionism and isolationism, and growing tensions in critical important regions to the European Union. I would say there's a very important issue here, is the issue of providing global, if the US are retreating from providing some of those global public goods, will China be willing to provide those goods, and will the EU accept that provision? Well, thank you very much again for inviting me.
Well, thank you, Carla. Unfortunately, we are running out of time as usual. Many important topics has been raised and highlighted, and they have to start the next session in 1 minute or two. I would like to apologize to Lucia Braña, who made 3 questions, so we have no time to answer them. But maybe I would like to finish with one question following the 4 scenarios that Miguel presented. So I would like to know your prediction about this, just to finish this panel, this very interesting panel. Maybe your prediction about these 4 scenarios. Which one do you think that will prevail? The one with the European Union taking side with the US, the second one taking side with China, more or less following the Switzerland model. The third one, the disintegration of Europe and each country following their own policy, or the fourth one, more global player from Brussels, from the EU. I don't know if you can just give as a prediction which scenario you think will prevail, and then we can finish with this. I don't know if you can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
And since, I don't know, I mean, since I put down the scenarios, I think Xiaoming and others and Carla,
yeah,
should engage, or should tell what they think before I give my
your final
prediction.
Okay, so Changmin, what do you think, Professor Zhang? Well, I don't know if Professor Zhang is listening. Or Carla, if you want to answer.
Rafa, I wouldn't mind answering, but I didn't. Could you just repeat it, because I didn't catch the first part.
Okay.
My sound is really bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay, no, it was because since we are running out of time, and my question was, Miguel presented these 4 scenarios regarding the European Union in the global stage. So what do you think which scenario will prevail? European Union closer to the US, taking side with the US, or taking side with China, or being a more global actor finally, or the third one that he mentioned, a more disintegrated Europe and with different policies. What do you think?
Well, I would like to say that that Europe would choose to be a more active geostrategic and geopolitical player, but I think it has some huge difficulties in tackling the divisions within its member states. When I talk about European integration issues with my students, I teach classes of international political economy, and when we refer to the European Union, we usually go back to I try to recall them that we need to go back to the early ages of the European integration, when Europe was built as a geopolitical, a geoeconomic process. It was the main goal of the European integration, and the main objective was to keep the peace among European countries. Sometimes we forget about this because Europe has grown to become such a huge economic global player that we forget about its geopolitical birth reasons. And I think the problem is that Europe also forgets about its origins. And so, as I said, I think Europe has got an enormous potential in what concerns economic, technological, and political issues too. I still believe that the fact of being composed by liberal democracies, it's an asset. We might question that the rise of populism in several European countries, but I still believe that being all of them, although some of them try not to be, but almost all countries of the European Union being liberal democracies, that is a very important asset in tackling global challenges and the ones that are coming. So I think Europe has every conditions to reinforce itself as a global player if it is able to tackle its internal divisions, because that's what I think that other countries, namely China and other countries, with legitimacy, they explore those divisions, and when they explore those divisions, it's obvious in its own interests, not in the European Union interests. I believe that a united Europe is clearly the best way to tackle these global challenges. If it's going to happen or not, well, I really not that I wouldn't like to make a very strong provision on that. I think, as I said, that a lot has to do with the outcome of the American elections, because if well, I think that, at least that's the way I see it. If Joe Biden wins the election, then China will have harder time to negotiate with the European Union, because there's an opportunity for the EU to join again forces with the US and to fight China, to engage in dispute with China in some of the most polemic issues. If Trump wins the election, then I think that China has here an opportunity to engage with the European Union, and so that they might bind together and fight. Not an enemy, but someone who sees globalization and the role of the US in global economics and politics in quite a different way that the European Union does. So basically, just the final remark, I would say that. Excuse me.
We have to finish.
Yes.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Okay, no, it's just, I think that what Europe needs to do is to tackle its internal divisions. If it appears as a solid, integrated, coherent group of countries, it will be much better to tackle these challenges. Okay. I'm sorry for.
So just to finish, because we are really out of time, Professor Zhang and Miguel, if you can. What's your prediction? The first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one? Very briefly.
Sorry, I just one word. There are many things to be discussed further in the future. I'm very interesting. I think for the EU, China, and American, the relation is very complicated now, and each country have their right to select their way to go, and we are advocate the mutualism and hope that EU China have a more cooperation on that field. And thank you for your good organization.
Okay. So Miguel, it was you who presented these 4 scenarios, so you can finish.
Yes, thanks. I think. Carla put it well. I think it all depends on really, that was as well the focus of my talk, right? To focus on the internal issues that we have in Europe. If we solve this, then we have all the potential to be those strategic autonomy or sovereign power or geopolitical power in Carla's structural power strange and scenario that, by the way, I wanted to say as well to Carla that I'm writing a book using Susan Strange framework, precisely called Europe in the Era of Giants. And so, I think we could exchange further on this. But yeah, I think Europe has the potential. And if we look back, by the way, Carla, that this month we had 50 years of the Werner Plan. Right, 50 years of the Werner Plan. If we look back, Europe has pulled together more than disintegrated, despite Brexit, and so who knows? I mean, the issuance of common debt and the commitment to repay it until 2058 tells us that there is a strong commitment to stay together. So let's see. 2058 is far away. But it's a key date to follow in that regard, because debt brings people together.
That's right. Well, we have to finish here. As usual, running time flies, and thank you very much to all of you and to IGADI for hosting this very interesting seminar. Thank you to all of you, and we keep in touch. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.